Hey everyone, welcome back to the range. My name is Matt, also known as the King of Armor Destruction, Armor Wizard. Zap, zap. The new phone books are here. The new phone books are here, hot off the presses from RMA Defense. This is their new XRT NIJ 07 RF2 or NIJ 06 level 3 plus plate. In full transparency, the fine gentleman over at RMA sent these plates over for us to destroy with no strings attached. Let's take a closer look at these guys on the table and see what we're going to do today. I actually have both models available for us for testing today. We have the 10x12 shooter's cut as well as our sappy size medium. Our 10x12 shooter's cut has the lightning cuts in the bottom corner as well as the advanced cuts up here for better rifle shouldering. This particular sample weighs 5.235 pounds or 2.38 kilograms. It's only 650 thousandths thick or 16.47 millimeters. This particular model is multi-curve, so we've got a nice sexy curve right there and a nice curve right there, and depending on your body type, usually multi-curves will fit better. The guy on our left here is our sappy size medium, and this is 705 thousandths thick or 17.92 millimeters. It weighs 6.11 pounds or 2.77 kilograms, and this one is multi-curve. Usually with our sappy curves, we've got the curve here, we have a curve right here, and then we even have some more curvature down here. If this is the first time you're viewing my YouTube channel, we do all of our body armor demos completely different than everyone else on YouTube. We're after worst case scenario. I'll say that again. Everyone, we're after worst case scenario. Since this is rifle armor, we shoot at 45 feet. We also shoot at 0 degrees, again, because that is worst case scenario. Anytime that the armor shifts at an angle and that bullet impacts an angle that is more material for that bullet to have to penetrate against, we use a giant clay briefcase filled with Roma-Plastilina #1 clay. That's the same clay that the NIJ uses, but they're in an environmental chamber and they heat that clay up, all day long. They're only allowed to take it out of the oven for an hour, I think, at a time, and then it has to go back in for 3 hours. They drop a ball on it when it's 100 degrees, and if that dimple is 22 millimeters or maybe it's 19 plus or minus 3, that certifies for backface. It's 50 to 60 degrees outside today when we're out in the woods. What I've done is I've heating that clay up in a little igloo down there, and we get the clay as warm as possible, and it does cool off a little bit, so we're just looking at a representation of backface. If we see something like 60 to 70 millimeters in my clay, in 308, likely in NIJ's eyes, that would be failing. Since this rifle armor employs a ceramic strike face per the NIJ, we've gone ahead and dropped each plate on its face 2 times as a preconditioning test. I think my particular drop test rig is a little harder on that strike face than, say, what the NIJ uses. After we've done our drop test, we mark our plates with a DT indicating that we've done the drop test, and if we've done it more than 2 times, we put that in parentheses, and then we do a torque test. That's where we take the opposing edges of the plate and we apply force to listen for any cracking. If we don't hear any cracking, we mark that with a TQ, and if we do hear any crackling, we mark it with a C. Now, since I have 2 different cuts here and 4 plates altogether, one of each of the sizes actually had some cracking, but then the other ones actually passed the torque test. This XRT plate from RMA is a full edge-to-edge strike face, meaning for this 10x13 size on this ESAPI medium, so that's a little larger than what ESAPI calls for. That ceramic strike face extends all the way out to the perimeter or very close to it. The 10x12 shooter's cuts actually measure 9 3/4 by 11 3/4, so that's pretty good that we're very close to that size, and we're not getting down to the 9 1/4 or 11 1/4 on there. We're getting pretty close to that labeled size. I do not detect any drop face foam on either one of these. I would recommend that RMA adds that. We're going to add a little bit of thickness and an insignificant amount of weight, but I think that having that foam on there goes a long ways to making these plates hold up better to abuse. We use a Pro Pal Digital DLX to capture our velocities, as well as a Garmin 0N. We're also trying out the new Athlon Optics little Doppler radar. So we've got actually 3 data sets we're going to use here. I'm trying to decide whether or not which one I want to use going forward, but sometimes having the 2 data sets goes in hand when one of the other ones wouldn't read. And we need to know the velocity of those rounds because, saying you stopped M193, but you're using a 16-inch barrel or some import surplus ammunition, you're not meeting the velocity spec. That's the biggest thing, is meeting the velocity spec for these threats listed by the NIJ. There's a little chart here that says M193 is 3250 feet per second, M80 Ball is 2780 plus or minus 30, so on and so forth. And finally, we put a spreadsheet at the beginning and the end, and we foreshadow all the threats we're going to shoot at it. We mark our velocities and our penetrations. We do a teardown at the end so we can confirm what the guts of our plate looks like to the best of our ability. The advantage of this XRT plate, it is supposed to be very budget oriented. I think it's $199 a plate, so that falls in a little more than what the 11 M855 is, but I think about $100 or so less than the 1092 G2. And effectively, depending on what kind of threats this is going to stop, this will put you in a very good place to have a weight-sided, lighter weight plate for better mobility versus being able to stop some of those threats without going to a level 4. I do want to remind everyone that I am not an NIJ lab, so if you see a threat stopped and or penetrated over here, you should always defer to the manufacturer to produce accredited, recent, and frequent lab results for those plate stoppages. I do believe RMA said that they will CPL this plate, and I think that is a good idea for them to do that, so that is that extra certification step that the NIJ uses to say that that plate is the same as the first one they built. And on the flip side, if you're the manufacturer and you see me stop some kind of insane threat at your plate, you should send that off to a lab and have that added as a special rifle threat to your panel. I do want to remind everyone that because of worst case, I have to place more shots on a plate than you would in a lab setting. They're usually only going to shoot sometimes 3 shots on a plate and move to a fresh one. We don't have that liberty here. So today, say for the M855A1 test, we're going to shoot probably upwards of 20 shots on that plate. And if you see a penetration after the 7th or 8th shot, that doesn't mean that this plate is garbage. Our ESAPI size plate number 1 is strapped in and ready to go. We're going to start this right off with the NIJ level 3 and or NIJ 07 RF1 and 2 threat of our M80 Ball. That's 145 to 150 grain full metal jacket. Typically it specifies a bimetal jacket, meaning that the jacket is comprised of a couple of materials, and usually we mean that to say that it has a ferrous material, steel, so that it attracts the magnet, as you can see here. This is some Winchester surplus. We have a 22-inch TC compass. 2816 on the Garmin, 2836 on the Rangecraft, and I smoke distract. Give me a second to go fix that. .2806 and 2821. 2831, 2836. We'll have to see what the light screen says. 2798. Easy enough on this shot number 1, 2, and then 3. Looks like we have a laminating layer on this plate, so any ceramic fragmentations that come off of the plate from that projectile being broken up should be contained in the backside, and it shouldn't spit out the front or your carrier. Place those bets in the comments below. No pass-throughs, folks. The clay is warm. I haven't measured the temperature. The back face, this would be the first one there, right around 39 millimeters. This guy down here, right around 46. And then this guy down here is probably the worst because it's an edge, closer to the edge shot. That one's right around 41 millimeters. Now it's hard to measure this again, like I said, because my clay, I'm not measuring the temperature, but it was stopped. And generally speaking, when you're looking at plates, you should never just judge the back face by the dimple in the back, because it can be kind of misleading, because this one has a little more of a dimple than that one, but obviously that one has a much larger epicenter. Now we'll be a little mean to this plate. So in the NIJ's eyes, they've already taken the 3 shots on that panel. They would have gotten a new panel and continued on with 3 more hits and so on and so forth. But we're gonna see how many shots of 5.56 common rounds this can stop. We've got a 22-inch TC compass, so this is maximum real world value, very close to the NIJ spec, if not over. We've got our 55 grain full metal jacket, M193, that is known for popping steel armor. Our polyethylene and ceramic composites can normally stop it, unless the ceramic and polyethylene is on the thinner side. Then we've got our M855 SS109, that is the official NATO round. It has a 62 grain bullet, lead core with a conical steel penetrator, right around 4950 RHC. If anyone online says that it is mild steel, it is not. It's hardened. It's not as hard as most of our armor piercing threats, but it is a hardened steel penetrator. So we've got approximately, I think, 5 to 6 shots of M193 and 5 to 6 shots of our M855. 3355. 3397, 3395 again, 3349, 3354, 3355, Now, this is not advisable in any way, shape, or form. Ceramic composite armor is not designed to do this, and pretty much there's no lab that would do this anyways. But we're gonna place a shot of M193 on top of a previous shot of M193 to see if this backing material that RMA is using will hold up any better to, say, you know, a stacked round. Sometimes polyethylene can do that, but we'll see what it's gonna do. So that last shot, again, we'll place another one hopefully directly on top of it. And that was 34-24, so that is smoking fast, folks. 30-71. 31-01. 30-50. 31-04 on both Doppler chronographs. 30-35. All right, we've got 16 shots in total on this plate, if I counted them correctly. Forgive me for any of the markings. RMA's fabric cover is hard to write on. I do like some of the other covers that vendors offer. I think they are a little neater finished than RMA's, but that's just a critique point, and it is just a cover. But M193 number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, and then 7, and then 8 were right on. The 8th one was right on top of each other, pretty close to it. Then our M855 number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So that's quite a bit of shots on this plate. Place those bets in the comments below. Oh, Raggy. It looks like we will pull this cover off and confirm. But we only have a penetration from our double shot of M193, as well as that shot right there, and a shot of M855. Now again, internet keyboard commandos, stop and take a breather. This plate is rated for 3 hits of those in a standalone configuration, and then the NIJ goes and gets another plate. We've subjected this to almost 6 times that threat standard, and I'd say it did pretty well. We'll have to check the velocity on that M193 shot, but all of those were over 100 feet per second over the max allowance on M193. I would say this plate did a pretty good job. Now, as far as back face goes, it looks like they're using some type of polyethylene, but it looks more woven, but don't think it's aramid. So that does a little better job at containing our back face signature, but not so well as containing any type of bullet construction that makes it through the ceramic. Confirmed, our only penetrations were that shot of M193, the doubled up shot of M193, the second shot obviously, and then this shot of M855. And I actually, by measurements, that is not a fair hit. That dot was only 1.5 inches away from that dot, so in the NIJ's eyes, it's not a fair hit. But in the real world, you know, people don't maintain shots on plate distance. They just shoot until the threat stops. So likely enough of that material was broken up that that little guy just found his way through. But again, 16 shots on one plate with only 3 pass-throughs, and 2 of those shots being non-fair hits. I'd say it's pretty darn impressive. Again, more for a budget plate too. At $199, this is less than the G2, a little more than 1155 level 4, but it is multi-curve and it's like 3 pounds lighter. Time to see how plate number 2, ESAPI size, will handle Mr. Good Stuff. This is our M855 A1 EPR, or Enhanced Performance Round. It is a 62 grain bullet with a copper core and a larger and harder arrowhead steel penetrating tip. I do believe the specification allows for 49 to 60 RHC, and every time that I've measured M855A1, it has been on the upper end of that scale, right around 59 to 60. Now, this is one of those gray market areas where this is not commercially available, so the likelihood of someone encountering this is not as high as, say, M193 or M855, but it has better penetration capabilities than both of those rounds. We like to include it in as much level, 3+ and 4 testing as we can. Again, we've got the 22-inch TC compass, so this is maximum velocity. And we're going to try to take as many hits on this plate as possible while maintaining that 2-inch shot pattern. That's what those little dots on the plate are for. If you're looking at picking any of this up, I do have a discount code at Warpig Armory of Buffman, and that'll save you a little bit of cheddar, as well as Dozer Munitions has some as well. 3217. $31.89, $31.93, $32.11, $31.69, $31.84, 12, 13, 14, 15 for M8055A1. And I just pulled that shot way too low, folks, because I was running my mouth. $31.55. That is 18 shots on a plate. If you aren't out of the way after the first couple, we've got problems. Well, this is easy enough because all shots on the plate were M855A1. Now this shot down here, that number 15, I had my glove on the trigger and I need to check the spring. So that's definitely not a fair hit because that is on the literal edge. But it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 shots on this plate. Place those bets and comments below. It looks like RMA is not laminating the back side of this plate, and I'd like to see them do that. Although again, it's a budget plate, so maybe that's why they're not for cost. Place those bets and comments below. Oh, Raggy. We'll peel the cover off just to confirm, but we've got a penetration on, that was the 4th, that one right there, that one, and that. We'll check that non-fair hit, but again, we're well past the design parameters of 18 shots on a plate. So, you know, if we stop 14 out of 18, I do believe when I tested the Hi-Com 4S17M, we stopped, what was it, 13 out of 15 of the M855A1. So if you really want to stop that many rounds, you have to up the cost of goods sold on that plate, laminate both sides, and probably switch to a ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. But nice. Uncommon threats from the longest barrel length, not a problem. Real world, when you're shooting 10.5 inch at distance, gonna stop those all day, at least in theory. No armor is 100% bulletproof. There's always a scenario and a possibility, but having confidence knowing that your plate can stop these at maximum velocity is a good thing. Confirmed total penetrations on plate number 2 are 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that was the 18th shot. So I mean, again, that's quite a bit of shots. It actually stopped that edge shot down there. That's pretty darn amazing, and that's why I like edge-to-edge ceramic strike face, so that we can get those potential stoppages, so if one got the edge. Now this one was really close to that first shot, so likely the ceramic was weakened and that went through, and then it carried on down to that one. That one was close to where the first 3 were, and because of how this ceramic isn't laminated on both sides, I think we just degraded the ceramic. This may be a high point in this particular ceramic and may be a weak point from where we drop tested it. Hard to say. I apologize about any of the audio quality in the last couple of clips. When I'm by myself, I sometimes don't check the batteries and they're always going dead. But we've got our 10x12 plate number 1, shooter's cut, strapped in, and we're gonna go right to what RMA rated this plate for special threat wise, and that's our M80A1. That is the evolution of M80. Think of it like M855A1's bigger brother. 130 grains, copper core, large and hard arrowhead steel penetrating tip. And when I've measured that, it's right around 49 to 50 on RHC scale. Again, I think the spec calls for upwards of 60, but most every time I measure it, it's always on the 49 to 50. We've got a 16-inch here. We should see 2,800 feet per second. That's what RMA rates it for. I think that's what they said their lab rates this for, which I would tend to slightly disagree about that velocity spec. We should rate it upwards of 3,000 feet per second because we do have some 20, 22-inch, and 24-inch 308s available. 2814, 2817 by the Crown. 2866, 2867. 2870, 2874. 2839, 2840. Not sure what the light screen's been reading. Hopefully you guys can read that. But we are above their specifications on that particular round. And we could be at that V50 rating where at that velocity, 50% of the shots go through. Easy enough. Shots number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. Now in the grand scheme of things, those would be all considered fair hits because they are more than 2 inches apart from each other. Place those butts in the comments below. Oh, Raggy. Hey, I think we found the V50 of this particular design. We've got 3 penetrations on this plate and 3 stoppages. So, you know, that 2,800 feet per second might be that V50 rating. I have no way to go any shorter without going to the 13-inch. And then I think we would be at a disadvantage there. So interesting. We're able to stop some of those M80A1 shots. Now, when I tested the 1092 in the past, that particular design could not stop those, but I think that design's advantage is that double laminated or crack arresting layer ceramic strike face on there. Plate number 4 is strapped in and ready to go. I apologize sometimes if these are very long-winded. I try to give you guys as much data as possible. If anything, watch it on 2x, or at least watch a third of it so that YouTube algorithm works for us and not against us. But I have one 5.56 threat that I want to try, and then we're going to go to the new hotness. But this is our R.A.N.G.E FMJ, I think it's TCAP. Say 62 grain lead core with a tungsten penetrator. The penetrator itself is not much bigger than the M855 penetrator, but it's made out of tungsten, so it's a lot harder. Now, this typically would be reserved for a level 4 threat. We've got a 14.5-inch upper from Pro 2A Tactical. They sent that out a while ago. Been a really solid upper for all of our velocity testing. We'll take 2 shots at that, and then we'll go from there. Just smoked the strap. .2741, 2743. If M80A1 is M855's bigger brother, our 6.8 by 51 millimeter would be his older brother, but slightly more in shape, sleek and slender. Maybe he favors cardio a little more, but he's still pretty strong and he can deadlift. But this is our XM1186, the Gen 1 variant. I do believe Gen 2 has some cantilevers in a revised penetrator core, but this is effectively the 6.8 EPR round or general purpose. It's 120 grains, this particular variant, with a copper core and a large hardened arrowhead steel penetrating tip. It is almost as long as the entire M80A1 bullet itself. I had to hand load these. I have no idea what the velocity spec is. This is the 16-inch SIG Spear MCX, so this is a 3-inch longer barrel than the M7. .3149. .3142. 3167, 3197. This caliber is kind of an odd duck when it comes to body armor, especially rifle armor, but I like to toss it in there because it is a what if, and ideally would simulate quite a bit of range if fired from a 338 Lapua, but this is our 8.6 Black. This caliber's claim to fame is its ultra-fast twist rate 1 and 3. It uses an AR-10 chassis. We've got the cube port chop up front. We've got two loads here. We've got a 250 grain solid brass spun round. That can be a little bit in the gray area depending on where you live when you load that, so be careful with that. Then we've got a 260 grain full metal jacket Swiss P AP tungsten core. This is the same penetrator that it is in the 196 grain 308 Swiss P AP, but this one has a lot more lead, obviously. So be on the left of the plate. On the right side of the plate now. Ooh, that one was a little fast, guys. 10:05. If anything, folks, it is a beautiful day out here to shoot armor. There are no bugs yet. A little bit of breeze, sun. Couldn't ask for a better day, and this is primarily why I like to do this, is just coming out here and enjoying this property that my dad has taken care of over the years. God bless his soul, rest in peace. Our R.A.N.G.E 556 tungsten core shot number 1, and then number 2. That is close to the edge, but I'll call that a fair hit. Our 6.8 GP number 1, 2, and then 3. Then our 8.6 AP number 1 and then number 2. Then the brass number 1 and then number 2. I might take one more shot down here when we're done with some M80 A1, maybe off camera. Keep the film a little on the short side. Place those bets in the comments below. Oh, Raggy. Our 5.56 shots stopped. Our 8.6 Black tungsten core and brass stopped. But our 6.8 GP XM 1186 blew right through that plate to Kingdom Come. It looks like you had to work at it a little bit, but I think this type of material is going to be at a disadvantage for some of these advanced threats. And again, the likelihood of someone facing these real world is probably very slim. I don't know of any gangbangers looking down 6.8. They're mainly picking up pistols and 5.56, maybe a 14-inch if they're lucky. I'd say this plate has done a really good job. Now, in terms of back face, we're not seeing a whole lot on this plate. The clay has gotten cold, but it's still pretty soft. So I'd say this material, as we called it earlier, is good at back face, but not so good at speed. And I think that's about all we need to do on this one.
Paging Dr. Matt to surgery. Paging Dr. Matt to surgery.
Now, for a fan favorite, the teardown. That's where you get to look at the guts of these plates. And based on the curvature of them, I do believe the backing material on the ESAPI is a little thicker than what is on the shooter's cut. But otherwise, effectively, both materials are identical between the two. So let's start with the second shooter's cut plate. This was the one that we shot the 6.8 GP at it, and the only 3 penetrations were those 6.8 rounds. This is some kind of new material that RMA is using. It's almost like a woven ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. You can see it looks like it's got, you know, that woven pattern there. It is pressed. RMA owns their own presses. I measured that right around 290 thousandths thick. It did keep most of its rigidness, so that's pretty darn impressive. Good that we were able to stop those 8.6 Black rounds, but I think the long and sleek nature of that 6.8 was able to penetrate. We are using alumina for our strike face. That's the white, more dense ceramic. It's known for being a little more robust than, say, silicon carbide or boron carbide, but it is sometimes not as good as stopping some types of threats, and it obviously is heavier. I measured that right around 306 thousandths. There is no drop face foam protectant on this. You can see our back side is not laminated, and I've said it once and I'll say it again. The harder it is for me to get into your plates, usually the better they are at multi-hit capability, or the better they are at stopping threats. So if we laminated the back side of this plate and then used a really good adhesive to bond it to our backer here, and it's harder to get apart, threats that are shot down here seem to contain better and stop that spread of cracks up here. But again, that's just my opinion. We do have a crack arresting layer up front. It is about 2 thousandths thick. There is our branding mark there that's been, looks like from the heat, been scrubbed off there. But this is kind of just like a fiberglass layer, and I would like to see them put that on both sides. We do have a little bit of a foam protecting ring. This is not the strike face reducing ring, but this is just a foam protecting ring that RMA has put on the outer perimeter of the ceramic, and that is a good thing, again, to protect it from bumps and bruises. I feel we should put that drop face foam protected on there. You know, it's going to be a couple ounces and what, 1/8 of an inch thick or so, but it does compress and it doesn't really make the plate that much thicker. Here was the first shooter's cut plate that we shot our M80A1 at it, and again, just the 3 penetrations, 1, 2, and 3. So it looks like we're at that V50. The material is not delaminating. It seems to hold its shape fairly well. And then we move on to our ESAPI cut. For whatever reason, this backing material thickness is at 400 thousandths. Maybe due to that curvature, you have to make that thicker, but we haven't lost any of its rigidness there. We didn't confirm any additional penetrations on this particular plate besides those 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 shots of M855A1. That shot down there on the literal edge, which would never be considered a fair hit in the NIJ's eyes, was actually stopped. Very, very impressive. And then on to plate number 1, the first plate. Our penetrations were the M193. The second shot of M193 stacked on top of the first shot, and then that shot of M855, which was really close to that shot of M80 Ball. You can see how that crunched up that backing material right there, and I'm going to guess maybe degraded that ceramic right there because of that lack of strike face. Overall, this is a fairly solid budget plate that contends with a lot of the higher placement level 3+ or NIJ RF2 plates that I have on my, recommended list that I don't like to try to keep because it can be highly variable depending on your mission. But I would say this ranks up there pretty well because of its ability to stop M855A1 as well as a lesser velocity M80A1. King of armor versus king of armor destruction. I would say our XRT from RMA put up a really good fight today. We were able to stop our common 5.56 and 308 rounds. We're at that max velocity spec and then some, 3250 feet per second for M193, and we were well over that, so that could be why we were seeing penetrations with it. We were able to stop a slew of M855A1 all on the same plate. Like I said in the past, I think the Hi-Com 4S17M stopped 13 or 14 out of the 17 or 18 shots. It would seem tile array plates would be better suited for that extreme multi-hit capability if you wanted to stop like 30 rounds of 5.56 on one plate. I would think possibly if we were to laminate both sides of that strike face and go to the ultra high molecular weight polyethylene versus this woven polyethylene, we might be able to do it. But again, this plate is designed to be a budget friendly plate. I do believe RMA said they will CPL this, so at $199, if that's their goal, we're a little more than what an 1155 cost-wise is, but we're a lot thinner and we're 2 to 3 pounds lighter than the 1155, and we're multi-curved, so that's all gonna equate to better mobility for you and better endurance and longevity if you're going to wear these things. Testing of our 277 Fury or SIG 6.8 tends to be very, very interesting. I don't have the velocity spec for that XM 1186, but we were able to pop all 3 rounds through this plate out of our 16-inch. I would be curious what it would do out of the 13-inch. I'm going to try to find the velocity specifications for that. As mentioned, if I can offer any constructive criticism to RMA to better this plate, it would be to laminate both sides with that crack arresting layer, or that fiberglass is what I like to call it. Do a better job of adhering that strike face to that backer, and possibly going to an ultra high molecular weight polyethylene, or maybe doing a hybrid of both that and this woven fabric in a upside sale model so that we could see what the limits of this particular strike face would be. With all that being said, it's time for me to get the heck out of here. But at the end of all my videos, I take a moment to thank all those who help make these possible, because there's a lot that goes into them. Number one is my family. They're out here all the time helping me take care of the property, push the buttons on the camera, even pull the trigger from time to time, and any time that I can spend with them is greatly appreciated. Deacon would like to remind you all to like, subscribe, and thumbs up this video so that a logarithm can work for us and not against us. Number two are my Patreon YouTube channel members. I have a campsite in the description below. It's a landing page with different affiliate links or discount tracking codes in there. I can't tell you what they are because YouTube will get grumpy, but that's down there. And effectively what I do with those, they cost you nothing, is I earn a sales commission off that, and I put that right back in the channel by buying armor or ammunition or guns from time to time. I do have one for RMA and a discount code Buffman, and I try not to push you guys towards sales. I'm offering you guys information, and if you've made your own buying decision from doing your own homework, I shouldn't be your sole source for homework, and you want to say thank you to the channel for all this data that I presented you, that's what those links are for. Number three are the fine gentlemen over at RMA, again in full transparency, sent me those XRT plates to destroy with no strings attached. And of course, number four is you all for watching. Until next time, I'll catch you at the range.